Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Bob's Live, our weekly show right here on the internet. And well, this week we're going to go to a couple locations. First off, we're going to head to our uptown greenhouse to take a look at this year's poinsettia crop. The last time we were up there, they still looked pretty green, but now they're starting to show some color. So let's go ahead and head uptown. Today I'm here at our uptown greenhouse where, as you can see, our Christmas poinsettia crop is starting to get some color. The last time we were up here, they were just starting to change, but now we can start to see their true colors. So the color change in poinsettias is dependent on day length, and as the days get shorter, that's what triggers them to change color. And it's really dependent on how much red pigment is present in the leaves. So with a lack of red pigment, you get a white leaf, and with a lot of red pigment, you get red. Depending on how much pigment there is, you might get something like this pink, or something like this cream with a slightly pink variegation in the middle. And depending on the distribution of pigment, you might get a speckled leaf like this. The bloom on a poinsettia isn't really a flower. It's specialized leaves called bracts. And if you want to see the actual bloom on a poinsettia, they're actually the little buds right here that are starting to come out. Our stores are starting to gear up for Christmas right now, and pretty soon you'll start seeing these poinsettias at your local Bob's Market. So that was a quick look at the poinsettias uptown. And we'll head back up there a little bit later to talk about caring for poinsettias. But if you want to learn more about caring for poinsettias in the meantime, on this week's show notes over on our website at bobsmarket.com, I've posted a link to a blog post about caring for poinsettias. And since I'm mentioning bobsmarket.com, of course you can find us online here on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching right now. But you can also find us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. So this week I also headed out to my garden, and I was doing some yard work over the weekend, and I thought I would kind of do a quick recap of what I did this past summer and what my plans are for the next year. So what I've got going on there. So today I'm out here in my yard doing some last minute fall cleanup. And I've got a few things that I'm working on, but I'm also working on plans for next spring. And I'm planning on some big changes right here in my meadow garden, which the last time we were out here, there was still some stuff that was blooming. But since then I've done some cleanup. And I've also kind of mowed some areas that I'm planning on tilling up in anticipation of planting wildflowers next year and kind of expanding the wildflower patches. So let's take a look at some of what I'm doing. First of all, I had this bed of nasturtiums that were just beautiful, and I had them right here next to the seating area, which I use to kill off grass. So next year, when I move this, I'll be left with a nice square patch there where I can expand this bed. And part of what I'm planning to do next year is move this seating area over to this area, which that is where the wildflowers were this last summer. So I've started mowing in a new path that kind of loops out around my pitiful cherry tree here. And it heads out and around and into the flower bed area. But next year I'm planning on expanding that area over into this area and leaving the path right here and then continuing it on this side out around these existing kind of shrubs that are already here. And then I'm also going to extend it out into the yard right here and loop it back around. That way it's less square and it looks more natural. This is the area where the wildflowers were at. And you can see that it died back really nicely, and then I mowed over it, and that helped to disperse the seeds. And the last big thing that I had to deal with was the cosmos right here. So yesterday, right before I mowed grass, I cut those down and piled them up there, and later on I'll burn that pile. So next year my plan is to, right in this spot, put the little wooden seating area that I have, and then plant cosmos around it. And that'll create a little barrier there and kind of make a little secret seating area here in the meadow garden. Because with it being, you know, pretty flat, and I don't have a lot of trees or shrubs or anything yet, that'll help kind of create a little private area, which is something that, you know, this garden has been lacking. So I'm going to do it with something that's less permanent that I'll have to replant every year, but it's a good kind of stopgap measure until I can start incorporating more shrubs and things like that into the garden. And speaking of garden, right over my shoulder here is the vegetable garden. So let's go take a look at that. So I didn't get a lot done with the raised beds this year. This winter I'm planning on getting the mulch in place and also getting dirt into the beds. But right now I'm just kind of using this one as a little bit of a compost pile, so I'm dumping stuff into there that needs to be composted, and then I'll just cover it over with soil once I start filling in the beds. But that's a good wintertime project, so I can work on that pretty much anytime. Right here next to the raised beds, I've tilled up an area where I'm planning on planting row crops. So things like green beans and corn I'll plant in this area. But still, it's shrinking the garden down to about half of the size that it was when I was doing a strict Victory Garden style garden. And of course my long-term goal is to have a nice picket fence around this. But you know, like everything the last couple years, it's taking time. As I said, here on the back side of the meadow, I'm planning on kind of rounding off this flat edge and expanding the wildflowers back into this section. But also, where this path comes out right here, which might be kind of hard to see, I'm going to extend on the other side of that an area out into this section of the yard that's going to be planted with buckwheat. And my plan for back here is to eventually possibly have a gazebo in this area, and that way it'll kind of make an area that kind of loops out around and in behind it. So, you know, that's really a long-term project, but I can go ahead and start working that area in and start building it. And I don't know, I might even get some lawn furniture to put back here, just to, you know, make another little retreat back here on the back side of our property. So this is kind of the very back corner of my yard, and the house is all the way over there. So it's kind of a secluded area. It's really kind of peaceful because in the evening, the neighboring trees really block the sun back here, and it It actually makes a nice shady area here in the yard. Speaking of my yard, here is the rest of my backyard. And the meadow garden, it is all the way down there. And I still mow this ginormous area right here. But directly in behind us, there is this hayfield. So something that I'm planning on doing possibly next year, depending on gas prices, I might just tie into that and kind of create a little field area right here in the backyard. If I do that, I'm going to mow it in such a way that it has kind of a more organic shape. And unlike the meadow garden, I'll treat this more like a field that I'm just mowing a couple times a year. But that would cut down tremendously on the amount of mowing that I have to do, and likewise, it would save gas. So that's kind of an update on my garden, and when I say garden, I mean both my meadow garden, the lawn, and the vegetable garden. But I also kind of outlined some projects I'm planning on working on this winter. Because, even though it's cold outside, there's still a lot you could be doing outside. So, in the vegetable garden, I've got to get mulch down over top of that weed cloth and get soil into the raised beds. So, that's two projects that I don't need warm weather to be working on. And then I also, thanks to the area where I live and the soil conditions, I can start plowing and tilling up areas in the meadow this winter. So I plan to go in some areas with a shovel and work up the soil. In other areas, I can go in with the rototiller and start tilling that area up. Because to plant the wildflowers, I only need to till down just a couple inches because the seed is broadcast on the surface. So it's not like planting potatoes where you got to get them down really deep. With the wildflowers, it's a surface planting, and a lot of those plants, they actually put down roots and help loosen up the soil. So the area where I have wildflowers planted this summer, the soil is actually looser there now than it was back in the early springtime when I was working up that area and first planting it. Which hopefully I do better preparing the soil now than I did then. When I tilled up that wildflower section this year, the next day I passed a kidney stone, so that wasn't fun. Anyhow, as I said, there's a lot of things that you can work on during the wintertime, but there's also some stuff that you can be doing right now, like cleaning out your flower beds. Maybe you have planted some mums, or you have mums in pots that can make their way out to the compost pile. Right now, if you planted like elephant ears outside that aren't cold hardy, you'll need to dig those up and bring them inside. Things like canna lilies, they can be dug right now since we're past, the first few frosts. And also things that you normally wouldn't think of, like solar lights. I have little solar landscaping lights across the front of my house. So one of the things that I did this weekend is I packed those up, cleaned them off, took the batteries out, so I can store them during the wintertime because, this time of year, they're not getting enough sunlight to charge up. Especially with my house because the front of my house faces north. So the solar landscaping lights, they kind of struggle to get enough sunlight during the day to charge. So this time of year, they were kicking on for maybe 30 minutes or so right after dark and then going dead. So that's something that you can do right now. Also, it's a good time to inventory your garden tools. A lot of garden tools you'll be putting up until next year, So it's a good time to sharpen them, oil them up so they don't rust, and also look and see if there's anything that needs to be fixed or replaced. And another thing is winterizing your lawnmower and getting it ready to pack away for the year. So you want to clean it up, make sure there's no grass up underneath the deck that can rust out the deck on it. And also, it's a good time to sharpen up the blades. That's one less thing that you have to worry about in the springtime. So, all of that I've got over in the show notes. Um, there's a blog post there called After the Frost, and if you read it, it talks about some winter lawn care tips. But then there's also links within that blog post that takes you to other blog posts about winterizing your lawnmower and different things like that. And this week on our blog, we're going to be talking about some other uh, kind of fall housekeeping tips for your landscape. And well, that is all that I have for this week. And I see Patty's here. Hi, Patty. And Gloria said, "Oh my, they are beautiful." She must have been talking about the poinsettias and not me. And well, that is all that I have for this week's episode. So until next week, keep growing.